My father installed a hidden camera in our country house to protect it from thieves, and I forgot to mention it to my husband. That weekend he went there alone to fix the roof, and on Monday I decided to check the footage. When I watched it, my hands started trembling uncontrollably. I forced myself to calm down and immediately called his mother. I said only one thing: "You raised a monster." But before I made that call, it was just another Monday. The worst Monday of my life, though I didn't know it yet. The morning started like any other. The alarm rang, quick shower, coffee. Todd had come back from the country house late Sunday night, tired but satisfied. He'd spent the whole weekend there by himself. He said the veranda roof was in bad shape, and if he didn't fix it now, the beams would rot by fall. I remember thinking how caring he was. My parents loved that house. It was their pride and joy, and Todd, knowing that, always helped out. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, eating scrambled eggs and telling me about working with the shingles. He smelled of fresh wood and a bit of sweat, a warm, masculine, earthy smell. "Well, Brooke, your veranda's good for another 100 years now," he said, stabbing his fork into the eggs. "I reinforced everything, checked every board. Your dad's going to be proud." I smiled. Of course my dad would be. Russell, my father, was an old-school man, a retired engineer who valued order and reliability above all. He admired that same steadiness in Todd. I finished my coffee and kissed my husband on the cheek. He smelled of eggs and something else, something faintly foreign. I didn't think much of it. He was tired, after all. Work, travel, fixing the roof, whatever. I'm off. There's a staff meeting this morning. "See you tonight," I said, adjusting my skirt. "Good luck, honey," he said without looking up from his plate. Work at school was always chaos: papers, reports, noisy kids, anxious parents. As the administrator, I was the one keeping everything from falling apart. The day went by in its usual rush. I didn't get home until 7, completely exhausted. Todd wasn't back yet. He'd warned me he'd be late at the site. The apartment was quiet. I changed into something comfortable, put on the kettle, and collapsed onto the couch. And that's when I remembered the camera. My father had installed it a month ago. Lately, little things had been disappearing around the neighborhood: buckets, tools, random odds and ends. Being practical, Dad decided not to wait until we were hit too. He bought a tiny motion-sensing camera online and mounted it himself in the corner of the living room, hidden behind the old cuckoo clock. The lens was no bigger than a pinhead, completely invisible. "Let it record. It won't take up much space, but if anyone breaks in, we'll have their face," he'd said. Mom and I had laughed at his thoroughness, then forgot all about it. And I completely forgot to tell Todd. It just slipped my mind. He rarely went to the country house alone. Usually, we all went together. Sitting on the couch that evening, the thought of that camera suddenly wouldn't leave me. Just simple curiosity. I wondered what it had captured over the weekend. Maybe a deer wandered inside? Or the neighbor's cat, the one always sneaking into our kitchen? Smiling at the thought, I got up and opened my laptop. Dad had set it up so the recordings from the memory card automatically uploaded to cloud storage whenever the camera connected to the internet at the house. He'd shown me how to access the folder. The password was simple: Mom's birthday. I went to the website, entered the login and password, and saw the list of files: Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday. I clicked on the first one. The footage was gray and a little blurry. The wide angle showed almost the entire living room, the old couch, the bookcase, the round table covered with Mom's favorite tablecloth. Then Todd appeared on screen. He walked into the room and looked around. He was wearing his work clothes, old jeans, and a dark t-shirt. He went to the window, glanced outside, then returned to the middle of the room and froze. He just stood there, staring at one spot. Something about him felt off. There was tension in his posture, something strange. And then another person walked into the room. I froze. My heart skipped a beat, then started pounding wildly, like a trapped bird. I leaned closer, trying to make out the face. And when I did, I stopped breathing. It was my brother. Chuck. What was he doing there? Todd had said he went alone. Chuck was supposed to be at work. Weekends were the busiest time at his car dealership. They stood in the middle of the room, talking quietly. The sound was poor and crackly, but their voices were unmistakable, my husband's and my brother's. They weren't fixing the roof. They were standing there like thieves, glancing around. I turned the volume all the way up, pressing my ear to the laptop speaker. Start with the cabinet. Everything valuable's in there. Just make sure you don't leave any traces, Todd said. You sure this'll work? It's mom's stuff, Chuck's voice trembled. That's exactly why it'll work. No one will believe she did it herself. They'll say it's her memory slipping, old age, senility. She's been forgetting things lately, hasn't she? People will only feel sorry for her. Just do what I told you, Todd snapped. My vision darkened. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. What were they talking about? Senility? My mother's memory was perfect. She solved crosswords faster than I did. And then the nightmare truly began. Right there, on my laptop screen, I watched my husband and my brother rob my parents' house. They worked methodically, without panic. Todd was in charge, Chuck followed orders. They opened the old carved cabinet where Mom kept the family's most precious belongings. Todd took out my grandmother's silver locket. I'd seen it my whole life. Mom wore it only on special occasions. He slipped it into his pocket. Then Chuck, my little brother, the one I used to carry on my hip, took Dad's collection of ceremonial daggers. Dad was proud of those. They were a reminder of his service. Chuck wrapped them in a cloth and stuffed them into his backpack. I watched, and my world shattered. Not just cracked, it turned to dust. Every gesture, every movement hurt physically. They weren't just stealing things. They were stealing our memories, our history. I kept skipping through the footage, file after file. They cleaned out the whole house, Mom's jewelry, old silver cup holders, even a few icons passed down from our great-grandmother. Things you couldn't put a price on. Things that were our family. And then came the final clip. They were by the door, bags in hand. The room looked like a hurricane had passed through, drawers open, things scattered everywhere. They'd staged a burglary. Todd pulled something shiny and small from his pocket. Here. Put this by the window, outside, where we supposedly got in. Like she dropped it trying to climb back inside, he said, handing it to Chuck. Chuck picked the object up between two fingers, and the camera caught a glint. A pearl. It was Mom's pearl earring, from her favorite set Dad gave her for their 30th anniversary. They'll find it, and that'll be proof. An elderly woman starts losing her memory, misplaces things, and then suddenly it turns out she's the one taking valuables out of the house. Maybe she sold them out of need, maybe she hid them and forgot where. Perfect picture to declare her incapable. No one will argue, Todd continued in a cold, calm voice. And Brooke? Chuck whispered. Cecil. What about Brooke? Brooke loves Mom. She'll be the first to raise the alarm, take her to doctors. She'll, with her own hands, help us set everything up. She won't even understand what's happening, my husband sneered. Sound drained from my ears. I watched my husband laugh on the screen and heard nothing but white noise. The world stopped existing. There was only this room, this screen, and the two monsters on it, my husband, with whom I'd lived for 15 years, and my brother, my own blood. They'd planned it together. They robbed our house to frame our mother. To make her look crazy. To take the property, the country house? The apartment? My hands began to shake. At first a little, then stronger and stronger until I couldn't hold the mouse. The laptop lurched on the table. I felt sick. I leaned back in my chair, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe a minute. Maybe an hour. Time stopped. Then the shock passed. The numbness fell away. In its place came rage, icy, all-consuming rage like I'd never known. It burned out my tears, fear, confusion. It left a cold, ringing emptiness and a single thought: they would pay for this. I forced my trembling fingers to work. I selected all the files in the cloud storage and hit delete. The computer asked if I was sure. I clicked yes. The folder emptied. Then I went to the table and picked up Dad's multi-tool. I carefully unscrewed the back of the old clock. I'd seen on the footage exactly where Todd and Chuck hadn't noticed the camera. I pulled out the tiny memory card, the only proof, the only copy. I clenched it in my fist. The plastic dug into my palm. That little card was now my weapon and my curse. To show it meant destroying not only my husband but my brother too. Destroying my father, who would not survive his son's betrayal. Destroying my mother, who would break if she knew what her children were capable of. Not showing it meant letting them destroy her. There was no choice. They started this war. I would finish it. I put the memory card into a small jewelry box, the one where we kept our rare pieces, and hid it at the very bottom under the velvet lining. Then I grabbed my phone. My hands no longer trembled. Inside me was ice. I found Irene, Todd's mother, in my contacts and tapped call. Long rings. She answered on the third. Brooke? Is something wrong? Her voice was, as always, cloyingly sweet. I stayed silent, gathering myself. I looked at my reflection in the dark phone screen, a woman with dead eyes. Brooke, can you hear me? I inhaled and said just one sentence. Quiet. Clear. Pouring all my hatred into every word. You raised a monster. And I hung up. The phone slipped from my hand onto the carpet with a dull thud. I didn't pick it up. I just stared at the dark rectangle of the window, where my own apartment reflected back at me, suddenly foreign and hostile. Everything in it had been bought together by us. This couch I sat on. This table, in front of which I had just seen betrayal. This rug the phone lay on. Everything soaked in lies. 15 years of lies. I couldn't stand still. The rage trapped inside demanded movement. I jumped up. What to do? Where to go? Call my parents? No. No way. Telling them would be striking the first blow myself. Call Chuck? What would I say? I know him. He'd cry, beg, and I might waver. I couldn't. I had to go to the source. To the one who raised him. To the one whose voice on the phone had been so calm and sweet. Irene. I grabbed my car keys and handbag from the hall. Not changing clothes, still in my gray cardigan and pants, I ran out of the apartment. I charged down the stairs, skipping steps, not waiting for the elevator. The cold stairwell air steadied me a bit but did nothing to cool the fury. Something inside me burned. I drove on autopilot, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The city blurred past in smeared lights, street lamps, shop windows, headlights. I saw none of it. One image filled my mind, Todd and Chuck in my parents' living room. Their voices discussing how they would ruin my mother. She'll, with her own hands, help us set everything up. Those words hammered at my temples like a mallet. I drove to her building without fully knowing what I wanted from it. A confession? Regret? I wanted to see fear in her eyes. I wanted to rip off the mask of the proper widow who always looked at our family with a hint of condescending superiority. She lived more modestly than us, but behaved as if she were doing us a favor by interacting with us. Her apartment block stood in an older neighborhood, a quiet 5-story building shaded by trees. I parked right at the entrance and slammed the brake. I jumped out, leaving the car unlocked, and ran up to the 3rd floor. My heart was in my throat. I pressed the buzzer and held my finger down until I heard footsteps inside. The door opened. Irene stood there in a housecoat, her hair neatly done. On her face there was no surprise, no worry. Only polite curiosity. Is something wrong? You look unwell, she said in that same saccharine voice as on the phone. I shoved past her into the apartment. She didn't resist, simply stepped aside and closed the door behind me. The familiar smell hit me, her perfume mixed with something sweet, like baked apples. The smell of false comfort. I turned to face her in the hallway. "Where is he?" I asked. My voice was hoarse, alien. "Who, dear? Todd? He's at work, working as always. Trying for the family, for you," she said calmly, looking me straight in the eyes. There was nothing in her gaze but that show of concern. "Don't call me that," I hissed. "And stop with the performance. I know everything." "What do you know, Brooke?" "Sit down, have some water. Your blood pressure must be up. You look so pale." She took a step toward the kitchen, but I blocked her way. "I know about the country house. I know about the robbery you staged. I know about the earrings. I know what you're planning to do to my mother." I said it all in one breath, waiting for any reaction, a scream, anger, panic. But she only tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to make sense of the ramblings of a lunatic. "The country house? What robbery, dear? What are you talking about?" "Todd spent the whole weekend there fixing the roof, working himself to exhaustion. He came back completely worn out." Her calmness infuriated me. It was worse than yelling. It was a wall that my accusations shattered against. "There was a camera," I shouted. "My father installed a camera. I saw everything. I saw your son and my brother taking our family's valuables out of the house. I heard them planning how to frame my mother, how to declare her mentally unfit. I heard every word." I was almost screaming now, my whole body shaking with emotion. But she just looked at me. Then, slowly, she walked to the armchair in the living room, sat down carefully, and folded her hands on her knees. "Brooke," she began softly, but every word cut like glass. "I understand that your job must be exhausting. The school, the children, the responsibility. That's a lot of stress. Sometimes nerves can't handle it. Sometimes your imagination starts creating terrible stories." She spoke to me like I was a sick child, patient, patronizing. "What son? What incapacity? Do you even realize how horrible the things you're saying are? My Todd is a good, hard-working man. He loves you. He respects your family. He would never. Don't you dare lie to me." I slammed my fist on the dresser beside me. A porcelain figurine rattled. I saw it. With my own eyes. "What did you see, Brooke? Static on a screen? Shadows?" She shook her head, and something like pity flickered in her eyes. "You've always been so sensitive, so worried about your parents. Especially your mother. Maybe you're so afraid of her getting old, of her health declining, that you imagined this nightmare yourself. Psychologists say that can happen." I froze, stunned by her audacity. She wasn't just denying everything, she was twisting it, turning my love for my mother into a sign of madness. "Stop. Just stop," I said hoarsely. "No, you listen to me." Her voice hardened. "You came into my house and accused my son of a monstrous crime. You accused your own brother. Have you even thought for a second how insane that sounds? It sounds like nonsense. And I'm telling you this as an older woman, as your husband's mother. Stop this nonsense. Go home. Make your husband dinner. Appreciate what you have. You've got a wonderful, caring man. Don't destroy your family with these fantasies." I looked at her and felt my strength draining away. I had come here with proof, with the truth that should have burned her to ashes. And yet now I felt like a fool, humiliated, crushed. She had built an impenetrable wall of calm and lies around herself, and I couldn't break through it. My anger was powerless. "I'm leaving," I muttered, feeling that if I stayed another minute, I'd either burst into tears or throw myself at her. But know this, I won't let it go. I turned to leave. I needed air. I couldn't breathe in that apartment. I was already in the hallway, reaching for the door handle, when I heard a click behind me. The lock turned. I turned around. Todd was standing in the doorway. He was wearing his work jacket and holding a grocery bag. He looked at me with what seemed like genuine surprise. "Brooke, what are you doing here? I thought you were home." And in that exact moment, Irene changed. It was like watching an actor switch masks on cue. The icy calm vanished. Her face twisted. Her eyes filled with horror. She clutched her chest and staggered, grabbing the armrest of the chair. "Todd." "Oh, thank God you're here," she cried, her voice trembling, suddenly frail and frightened. Todd dropped the bag instantly. Oranges rolled across the floor. In 2 strides he was by her side, holding her shoulders. "Mom, what happened? What's wrong?" He looked at her with concern, then turned his gaze to me. She burst in here," Irene gasped, pointing at me with a shaking hand. "She was shouting, saying awful, crazy things about you and Chuck. That you're thieves, that you want to put my mother in a mental hospital." Todd, I got so scared. I thought she'd lost her mind. She started sobbing into his chest, real, bitter tears. It was the performance of a lifetime. Todd pulled her closer, stroking her hair. He looked at me over her gray head. And in his eyes, there was no anger, no surprise, only deep, crushing pity. He looked at me the way people look at someone hopelessly ill, with concern, with sympathy, with terrifying gentleness. "Brooke," he said quietly, almost whispering, "what are you doing? Look what you've done." I stood there in the hallway, surrounded by the scattered oranges, watching the scene, my husband comforting his frightened mother. And I understood. This wasn't coincidence. His arrival was part of the plan. They weren't just denying everything, they were already acting. Their first move was to make me look insane. I stood there in silence, watching them, mother and son, perfectly in sync, playing their parts. My husband, my betrayer, looked at me with pity. And I looked back at him, feeling the ice inside me harden even more. The rage was gone. Only cold calculation remained. They thought I was broken, defeated. Let them think so. I said nothing. Not a word. I stepped over the scattered oranges, opened the door, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Todd murmuring softly to his mother, "It's okay, Mom. I'm here. I didn't go home. I couldn't stay in that apartment that night. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, paid for one night. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what to do next." They were ready for everything. They had thought through every step. My call, my visit, it had all been part of their plan. They were expecting my reaction, waiting to use it against me. I lay on the hard motel bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the footage in my mind again and again. Every word, every move. Their plan was monstrous, but brilliant in its simplicity. They didn't just want to take the property. They wanted to destroy my mother emotionally, crush her reputation, make everyone believe she'd gone mad. And me, they were turning me into the hysterical daughter losing her mind from grief. I barely slept. Toward morning, I drifted into a restless, heavy sleep, only to wake up to the sharp sound of my phone ringing. I flinched, grabbed it. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A minute later it rang again. This time, it was Mom. My heart sank. "Sweetheart," her voice trembled through tears, "something terrible's happened. The country house, it's been robbed." I sat up on the bed. So this was it. It had begun. "Mom, calm down. What happened? Tell me everything, step by step." "Chuck went there this morning to check on the place. Said he wanted to surprise your dad and fix up the garden a bit. But Brooke, the door was broken open, everything's turned upside down. He called the police. They called us too. We're on our way there now. Can you come?" "Yes, Mom. I'm coming. I got dressed in 5 minutes. Yesterday's clothes were wrinkled, but I didn't care. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale face, dark circles under my eyes. I looked exactly the way they wanted me to look, like a woman on the verge of a breakdown. I reached the country house quickly. There was already a police car by the gate, lights flashing, another unmarked car, and my father's sedan. People crowded the yard, 2 uniformed officers, another man in plain clothes, my parents, and Chuck. When Mom saw me, she ran up and hugged me, crying. They took everything, Brooke. Everything that mattered. All our memories. Dad stood next to her, fists clenched. His face was as gray as concrete. He was always so composed, but I could see the pain in him. And there was Chuck, my brother, playing his part perfectly. Pale, nervous, fidgeting with his phone as he talked to the detective, who was scribbling in a notepad. I got here and saw right away, the lock on the gate was busted. I went inside, and the front door was wide open. I knew something was wrong. I stepped in, and then he gestured toward the house, his voice cracking. I stared at him, feeling nothing but disgust. How could he look our parents in the eyes and lie so easily? A man in plain clothes waved me over. He looked about 50, tired-faced but sharp-eyed. Brooke? I'm Senior Detective Hardy. Can you tell me when you were last here at the house? I answered mechanically. I told him I'd been there 2 weeks ago with my parents. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary then. That's when Todd arrived. He came straight from work, wearing his business suit without a tie. His expression was serious, concerned. He went up to my parents, hugged my mom, shook my dad's hand. This is awful. I'm so sorry. The important thing is, you're safe. Things can be replaced. My parents looked at him gratefully. There he was, their reliable, caring son-in-law, rushing over the second he heard. I watched the scene, and nausea rose in my throat. The police moved around the property, inspecting the house, questioning neighbors. I stood aside, avoiding everyone's eyes. I knew what was coming. I'd been waiting for this moment with dread, and then it happened. One of the younger officers, who was examining the area around the house, suddenly shouted, "Hardy! You'd better see this, looks like something." Detective Hardy, my parents, Todd, and Chuck all gathered near the living room window. The officer, wearing gloves, carefully lifted something small and shiny from the ground with tweezers. A pearl earring. Mom gasped, covering her mouth. That's my earring. From the set Russell gave me. I thought I lost it at home. I turned the whole place upside down looking for it. How did it end up here? Her voice trembled. Everyone looked at the earring, then at her. The air grew heavy with uneasy silence. I saw confusion flicker in my father's eyes, confusion mixed with fear. Chuck lowered his head, pretending to grieve. And then Todd spoke. He stepped forward, his tone soft and full of sympathy. "Mr. Hardy, I don't want to say anything unfair, but my mother-in-law has been having some trouble lately. With her memory. She's become forgetful, misplaces things, can't remember where she puts stuff. We're all really worried about her." He said it with such gentle concern, so sincerely, that anyone would have believed him. He was speaking to the detective, but his words were aimed at my parents. He was planting the seed, leading them toward the very idea he'd invented himself. Detective Hardy listened intently, nodding. Then he looked at my mother differently, no longer as a victim of a robbery, but as someone to be examined. "Todd, stop talking nonsense. Mom's memory is perfectly fine," I snapped. All eyes turned to me. In my father's, reproach for my tone. In my mother's, hurt. In Todd's, the same infuriating pity. Detective Hardy gave me a cold, irritated look, the kind you give someone who's getting in the way. "Ma'am, please don't interfere with the investigation," he said curtly. "We'll handle this." He turned away from me and went back to talking with Todd as if I didn't exist. They stepped aside, Todd gesturing animatedly, Hardy listening with serious, sympathetic attention. I stared at them, rage boiling inside me. This Hardy believed every word Todd said. He didn't question a thing. He already had the story in his head, one where my mother was the prime suspect and I was the hysterical daughter losing her grip. Then Todd finished his quiet conversation with the detective and turned toward me. A faint, smug smile touched his lips, the kind that made me sick. The smile of someone who knows he's already won. He walked back to my parents, who stood there confused and shaken. "Don't worry. Everything will be fine. I just spoke with Detective Hardy. We went to school together. He's a good man, very thorough. He'll get to the bottom of this." He put a reassuring hand on my father's shoulder. And I froze. A school friend. Hardy was his old school friend. That's when everything clicked. The investigation was a farce from the start. This man wasn't going to find anything. He already knew the truth, the version Todd had fed him. They hadn't just framed my mother. They'd made sure the official investigation would go exactly the way they wanted. They had control of everything. I stood there watching Todd comfort my parents while his detective friend barked quiet orders to the other officers, and I felt trapped. The walls of that trap were closing in, and there was no way out. The trap had snapped shut. I looked at Hardy again, and his tired face no longer seemed just tired. Now I saw the cold, calculating cooperation behind it. He wasn't just a detective. He was my husband's weapon. Hardy walked up to my mother. His tone turned soft, almost fatherly. "Marley, please don't worry. We'll just need you to come down to the station for a bit. A few questions, nothing serious. Purely procedural. You understand, theft is a serious matter, and this piece of evidence is unusual. We just need to rule out all possibilities." Mom flinched. "To the police station? But why? I already told you everything." "I have no idea how that earring got there," she said, her voice trembling. "Mom, don't worry. I'll go with you," I said, taking her arm. Her hand was ice cold. Hardy gave me that same look of mild irritation. "Brooke, that won't be necessary. We're only going to talk to your mother. An informal conversation. Your presence will just make her more nervous. You can see she's already upset." "I'm not going anywhere without my daughter," Mom said firmly. Hardy sighed, as if dealing with stubborn children. "All right, you can come. But you'll wait in the hallway." "That's not a request." The police station smelled of dust, cheap cigarettes, and something heavy, despair, maybe. They led us down a long, dim corridor. Mom walked beside me, gripping my arm, glancing around with frightened eyes. For her, a woman who had lived an honest, spotless life, these walls felt like another world. A frightening one. Hardy led her into his office and stopped me at the door. "Wait here," he said, shutting it in my face. I was left alone in the empty hallway. I could hear muffled voices from inside but couldn't make out the words. I paced back and forth across the worn linoleum, clenching and unclenching my fists. What was he saying to her? What kind of questions was he asking? What was he implying? I imagined my mother sitting across from that man, confused, humiliated, trying to explain something even she couldn't understand. Minutes dragged into eternity. I felt utterly powerless. I knew the truth. I even had proof. But I couldn't use it. I was locked out, while the person I loved most in the world was being slowly and methodically destroyed inside that room. An hour passed. Maybe two. Finally, the door opened. Mom stepped out. She was as pale as a sheet. She wasn't crying, her eyes were dry and empty. I'd never seen her like that before. It was worse than tears. It was total emptiness. Hardy followed her out. "That's all for now," he said, avoiding my eyes. "You're free to go. We'll contact you if we need anything else." I took Mom's arm, and we left. She stayed silent all the way to the car. Silent as we drove home. I tried to talk to her, to ask what happened, but she only shook her head. At home, she sat in her chair and said quietly, he asked if I had debts. If I ever gambled. If I'd noticed myself taking things that didn't belong to me. Her voice was flat, lifeless. She stared at one spot on the wall. Brooke, he thinks it was me. He thinks I've lost my mind and robbed myself. And then she cried. Quietly, without a sound. The tears just rolled down her cheeks. Dad, who'd been silent the whole time, walked over and put his arms around her shoulders. His face had turned to stone. I looked at them, my broken, humiliated parents, and the hatred I felt for Todd and Chuck was suffocating. This was only the beginning. They wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. I stayed with my parents until late that night, until Mom finally calmed down and took her medication. Dad insisted I go home. You need rest too. Things will look different in the morning, he said. He was wrong. Morning would bring nothing but more pain. I got back to our apartment after midnight. The lights were on. Todd was home. Good. It was time to talk. I was ready for anything, shouting, threats, a fight. I wasn't afraid anymore. I walked into the bedroom and froze. Todd was standing by the closet, calmly packing his clothes into a large suitcase, shirts, jeans, sweaters, neat, careful, deliberate, like he was getting ready for a business trip. He saw me but didn't stop. What are you doing? I asked. My voice was calm. Too calm. He folded another shirt, placed it in the suitcase, and only then turned toward me. His face wore that mask of sorrow people put on at funerals. I'm leaving, Brooke, he said quietly, with just the right amount of pain in his voice. I can't do this anymore. Leaving? Where? I don't know. To Mom's, maybe. For a while. I need to think. He came closer. He smelled of expensive cologne and lies. Brooke, I just can't live in a house with someone who hates my family this much. Who's willing to accuse my own mother and brother of such awful things? I said nothing. I let him speak. What you did yesterday at my mother's, and the way you acted today at your parents' house, it's gone too far. You're paranoid, Brooke. You see enemies everywhere. It's your obsession, your anxiety about your mom, it's eating you alive. And it's destroying our marriage. He said it with such sincerity, such conviction, that for one insane second I almost believed him. Maybe I really was losing my mind. Maybe there hadn't been any video at all. But then I remembered their faces on the screen. Their voices. And the fog lifted. I love you, he went on, his voice trembling. I always have. But I can't watch you drown in this darkness. I can't stay here while you destroy everything we've built over 15 years with your suspicions. I need space. I need time to figure out what comes next. He tried to take my hand, but I pulled it away like from fire. So, this is all my fault? I asked, my voice icy. My paranoia? I didn't say that, he shook his head, his face full of false compassion. You're not to blame. You're sick. You need help, Brooke. But I can't help you until you want it yourself. My presence just makes things worse. He zipped the suitcase shut, picked it up, and walked to the door. I'll leave you the car. I'll call you, he said, as if we were parting for just a few days. He stopped in the doorway, turned, and looked at me one last time. I'm so sorry, Brooke. I'm sorry it all ended like this. And then he was gone. I heard the click of the front door lock. I was left standing alone in the middle of the bedroom, staring at the empty half of the closet. And that's when I understood. This wasn't some impulsive decision. This wasn't him running away. It was his next move, cold, calculated, deliberate. He hadn't just left me. He'd made himself look like the victim, the poor, heartbroken husband driven away by his wife's madness. He hadn't just abandoned me, he'd built himself an alibi. He'd carefully prepared the ground so that no one would ever believe a word I said. Our breakup was just more proof of my supposed insanity. The sound of the lock echoed through the empty apartment. I stood there, staring at the space where his suitcase had been. The air felt thick, heavy. He hadn't simply left me, he had surgically made me the villain. Every move I made, every attempt to cry for help would now only confirm their story: paranoia, instability, madness. The loneliness and helplessness hit me so hard I wanted to collapse to the floor and scream. But I couldn't afford that. Todd was a strong opponent, calculating, cold-blooded. And he had his detective friend on his side. What did I have? A memory card I couldn't use. And fury. Pure, distilled fury. Enough playing defense. Enough reacting to their moves. It was time to make mine. Todd was a wall. Irene was a wall. But there was one weak link in their chain: my brother. Chuck. I grabbed my car keys again. I had no idea what time it was, and I didn't care. I stormed out of the apartment, out of that place that no longer felt like mine. Behind the wheel, I sped through the dark city, my mind pounding with one thought: Chuck. He had to answer. He had to look me in the eye. His apartment was in a new high-rise across town. He'd bought it a couple of years ago on a mortgage, proud of it. I'd never visited him this late before. I parked in the courtyard and looked up at his windows on the 7th floor. The lights were on. He was home. I took the elevator up, feeling my insides twist tighter with every floor. I didn't know exactly what I'd say. I only knew I wouldn't leave without the truth. I rang the doorbell, long and hard. Finally, I heard shuffling inside, slow steps. The door opened on the chain. In the narrow gap appeared his face, pale, hollow, eyes red from lack of sleep or crying. "Brooke, what are you doing here at this hour?" His voice was a hoarse whisper. "Take off the chain, Chuck. We need to talk." He hesitated. I saw fear in his eyes. "Take it off," I said coldly, "or I'll start screaming for the whole building to hear." He looked around nervously, then unlatched the chain and let me in. The place was a mess. Dirty dishes on the kitchen table, clothes strewn across the couch. The air reeked of alcohol and fear. On the coffee table sat an almost empty whiskey bottle and a glass. He closed the door behind me and leaned against it, as if afraid I'd run, or someone else might walk in. What happened?" he mumbled. "I should be the one asking you that." I stepped closer, staring him straight in the eyes. "How do you sleep at night, little brother? Do you dream about our parents? About Mom, the woman you pretended to feel so sorry for at the house today?" He flinched and looked away. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop it." I grabbed him by the collar of his t-shirt. He was smaller than me, weaker, I could feel it. "Stop lying. I know everything. About the camera." At the word camera, his body went limp. Whatever pitiful courage the whiskey had given him vanished. He looked at me with the wide, terrified eyes of someone seeing a ghost. What camera? The one, Chuck. The one that recorded you and my husband robbing our parents' house. The one that caught you talking about planting Mom's earring to make her look insane. Do you want me to quote exactly what your buddy Todd said? I let go of him. He slid down the door to the floor, clutching his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. He started whimpering, a low, pitiful sound, like a beaten dog. "Brooke, I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." I looked down at him, no pity, only disgust. "Didn't mean to? You didn't mean to steal Grandma's locket? You didn't mean to take Dad's daggers? You didn't mean to frame your own mother for a crime?" It was him. Todd. He lifted his tear-streaked face. He planned everything. I trusted him. Trusted him? Trusted what? That making our mother look insane was a good idea? He jumped to his feet, desperate. "I had debts, Brooke. Huge ones. You don't understand, they would have thrown me in jail. The collectors were threatening me, saying they'd break my legs. I didn't know what to do. And Todd, he showed up like a savior. Said he could help. Said there was a way to fix everything. He gave me money, paid off the worst of it. He started pacing the room, words spilling out fast, like something breaking loose after being trapped too long. He said it was just a setup, that we'd take a few things for a while, then he'd bring them back somehow. Said we just needed to scare them a little. Make them realize Mom's getting old, that she needs care, guardianship. That they'd sign the property over to us, to protect it from her confusion. He said it was for their own good. I swear, I never thought it would go this far. The police, the interrogation, I never thought it'd come to this. He started crying again, loudly this time, wiping at his face with shaking hands. It was pathetic, disgusting. A weak, spineless man who'd let himself be pulled into a monstrous scheme, now trying to paint himself as the victim. And you believed him? I asked quietly. You believed that turning our parents' life into a nightmare was for their own good? I was desperate, he shouted. You don't know what it's like, getting calls every day, threats to break your legs. Todd was my only way out. He dropped to his knees in front of me, grabbing my hands. His palms were cold and wet. Brooke, please, I'm begging you. Don't show that recording to anyone. Please. It'll kill Dad. And Mom, she won't survive it. I'll fix it, I swear. I'll make it right somehow. I'll talk to Todd, we'll bring everything back, just don't show it. I swear on Mom's life, don't destroy me. He looked up at me, eyes wide with pleading and raw, animal fear. On our mother's life, I swear. Hearing that phrase, from the man who had nearly destroyed that very woman, felt like the final blasphemy. I pulled my hands free. Inside, I felt nothing. His tears, his begging, his pathetic excuses, none of it stirred pity or anger anymore. Just exhaustion. And disgust. My brother wasn't just a traitor. He was nothing. Get up, I said flatly. Stop degrading yourself even more. I turned and walked to the door. I'd gotten what I came for, his confession. But it didn't make me feel any better. His pitiful babbling only tangled things further. What was I supposed to do with this truth? With this broken, cowardly man who happened to be my brother? Brooke, wait. Promise me, he shouted after me. I didn't answer. I just walked out and closed the door behind me. I took the stairs down instead of waiting for the elevator. My head was buzzing. His pleading voice mixed with Todd's cold one, with my mother's quiet crying. Lies, betrayal, fear, all twisting together into one choking knot. Outside, the night air was cool. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my mind. That's when a taxi rolled up to the building. A woman stepped out, tall, wearing a dark, tailored coat. She moved with purpose, with a grim sense of control. In her hand was a large leather briefcase. She walked right past me without a glance and went to the entrance. The streetlight caught her face. Irene. My heart stopped. What was she doing here, at this hour? This wasn't a friendly visit. The way she moved, the look in her eyes, that briefcase, it all screamed business. Serious, urgent business. She punched in Chuck's apartment number on the intercom. The door buzzed, and she went inside. I stood in the shadows beneath a tree, watching as the darkness swallowed her. And suddenly, everything clicked. Chuck wasn't just weak. He wasn't just a pawn. He was a puppet. And the puppet master had just arrived, to make sure the strings were still tight, to pull them harder if needed. This wasn't just a scheme of two men. My mother-in-law wasn't a bystander. She was an active player, the one orchestrating it all. She'd come here tonight to make sure the weakest link didn't break. I stayed hidden under the tree, frozen in place. The cold seeped into my bones, but I didn't feel it. Before my eyes, the mosaic finally came together. Irene's visit to Chuck, right after I'd left, that wasn't coincidence. She'd come to contain the damage, to patch the cracks. My confrontation with Chuck, his breakdown, they'd expected it. Planned for it. Chuck, terrified and broken, must have called his savior Todd the moment I walked out. And Todd had sent her, Irene, arriving like a crisis manager stepping onto a sinking ship. The thought burned like acid. I wasn't fighting a greedy husband and a weak brother. I was fighting an organized force, each person playing their part. And at the head of it all stood her, the quiet, respectable widow, Irene. I waited another 20 minutes, until the light in Chuck's apartment went dark. The taxi that had brought her was long gone. That meant she was staying. Staying the night to make sure the strings were pulled tight again. I got home at dawn. The apartment greeted me with silence, cold, echoing emptiness. I went to the bedroom, opened the jewelry box, and took out the memory card. That tiny piece of plastic felt scorching hot in my fingers. It was my only weapon. But with every day I hesitated, it became less powerful. They were acting. I was paralyzed, bound by love for my parents. The next few days turned into a slow, suffocating nightmare. I took unpaid leave from work, telling them I had family issues. I couldn't focus on reports and lesson plans while my own family was falling apart. I spent all my time with my parents. Mom barely left her room. That humiliating police interrogation had broken her. Once so full of energy and warmth, she now sat for hours in her armchair by the window, silently staring outside. Dad moved around the apartment like a storm cloud. He tried to stay positive, told Mom the police would figure it out, that it was all a misunderstanding. But I could see it, the seed of doubt had taken root. Todd's words about Mom's forgetfulness, the earring they'd found, all of it fed his quiet fear for her mind. Todd didn't call. He'd vanished. And his silence said more than any excuse could. He'd given me exactly what he promised, space. Space where I was completely alone. Then, small things started to happen. Strange things. Our neighbor, Mrs. O'Connor, who'd known me since childhood, who always smiled and stopped to chat, now looked away when she saw me, mumbling a quick hello before hurrying into her apartment. The man at the grocery store, the one who always saved the best tomatoes for Mom, had suddenly become distant, polite, treating her like a stranger. Mom noticed it too. "Brooke, something's happening," she told me one evening. "People, they look at me differently. Like they feel sorry for me." I brushed it off, said she was imagining things, just tired. But I knew she wasn't. The air around us was changing, thicker, poisonous. Rumors were spreading. I realized it fully when I went to the pharmacy to get her medication. 2 women from the next building were standing in line ahead of me. They didn't see me. "Have you heard about the neighbors?" one whispered. "Oh yes," the other replied. "They say Marley's gotten worse. Some kind of kleptomania, stealing things from her own house and hiding them. Such a shame. She used to be such a lovely woman. Old age is cruel. Her son and son-in-law are worn out, poor things. And the daughter? They say she's lost it completely, snapping at everyone." The floor seemed to vanish beneath me. I gripped the counter, listening as they tore my family apart, word for word repeating the lies Todd had invented. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was a campaign, deliberate, targeted. Someone was spreading it carefully, persistently. And I knew who. I just needed to find proof. Find someone who could confirm what I already suspected. I remembered Tessa, Mom's old friend from the school where they used to work. She was a straightforward, honest woman, loyal to our family. She lived in another part of town, and I hoped the poisonous wave of rumors hadn't reached her yet. I also knew that Irene sometimes talked to her. They weren't close friends, but they moved in the same circle of old acquaintances. I called Tessa and asked to meet. I told her it was urgent, something I couldn't discuss over the phone. She agreed right away. She could hear the tension in my voice. We met in a small park near her home. She looked at me with concern. "Brooke, what's wrong? You look awful. Is it your mom?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. Well, almost everything. I didn't mention the recording or Chuck's involvement. I couldn't. I just said that our country house had been robbed, that the police suspected Mom because of some ridiculous piece of evidence, and that Todd, instead of supporting me, had left, calling me paranoid. And now, rumors were spreading all over town. Tessa listened, her expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, she stayed silent for a long time, staring off into the distance. "So that's what this is about," she finally said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Tessa, do you know something?" She looked straight into my eyes. "Brooke, Irene called me 3 days ago. She was not herself. Crying on the phone. My stomach turned to ice." "What did she say?" "She said your family was going through a terrible tragedy. That she was very worried about you and your mother. She told me your mom had started having serious problems, forgetfulness, mood swings, aggression. That the incident at the country house was the last straw. She said your mom must have taken those things herself and then forgotten." Tessa shook her head. She sounded so convincing. So heartbroken. She paused for a moment before continuing. "And then she started talking about you. Said you couldn't accept your mother's illness, that you'd become suspicious of everyone, accusing her son, Todd, of horrible things. She said Todd had been forced to leave you because living with you had become unbearable. She said he was scared for your mental health. Irene asked me, as an old friend, to check in on your family, to help out if I could." Tessa stopped, guilt flickering in her eyes. "And I almost believed her, Brooke," she said quietly. "She was so sincere, so devastated. I even thought about calling your mom, but I didn't know how to start the conversation. I figured maybe it was better to stay out of it, since things were so sensitive." I sat on the park bench, staring at my hands. They weren't shaking. I was completely calm. Everything had finally fallen into place. This wasn't just lying. It was a calculated information war. Irene hadn't waited for rumors to spread, she had started them herself. Personally. Systematically. One call at a time. She wasn't denying the truth, she was replacing it with her own version. She cried. She played the grieving mother-in-law, dripping sympathy into every ear she could reach. She was weaving a web of lies around my mother, a social prison. She was making sure everyone, neighbors, friends, colleagues, would already believe Mom was losing her mind. So when they finally moved to legal action, public opinion would already be on their side. So no one would question the narrative that the sweet, aging teacher had simply gone mad. It was a devilishly perfect strategy. I thanked Tessa and walked out of the park. Her words didn't shock me, they only confirmed what I already knew in my gut. Irene was working ahead of me, shaping public opinion, tightening her web of deceit thread by thread. And with every tearful phone call, that web grew stronger. I walked down the street, not seeing where I was going. My mind felt icy clear. I couldn't fight this alone anymore. I couldn't keep quiet to protect the family. That approach had failed. They were attacking from all sides, the police, the gossip, the marriage. And I'd been clinging to the illusion of peace in a family that had already been destroyed. There was only one person left who could help me. My father, Russell. The engineer. The pragmatist. A man who believed in facts, not emotions. He was my last hope. I had to tell him everything. Show him the proof. Yes, it would crush him, but better a painful truth than a sweet lie that would kill his wife. I drove to my parents' place. Mom, as usual lately, was lying in bed. Dad sat in the kitchen, staring grimly out the window. He'd aged years in just a few days. There was more gray in his hair. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, sitting across from him. "Seriously? Just the two of us?" He gave me a heavy look. "What now?" "It's worse than we think. I know who's behind all of this." I took the memory card out of my bag, a small black rectangle, and placed it on the table between us. "What's that?" he asked. "The truth," I said. "Dad, remember the camera you set up in the country house? It recorded everything." Then I told him everything. From the start. How I'd found the recording by accident. What I'd seen. Todd and Chuck. Their conversation. The plan with the earring. The words about declaring Mom incompetent. I spoke calmly, without emotion, just the facts, the way he liked it. I watched his face harden, the muscles in his jaw tightening. When I finished, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. He stared at the memory card on the table. "Here," I said, sliding my laptop toward him. "It has a card reader. Let's watch it together. You'll see it all yourself." I was certain he would, that the man of reason would want to see proof, to confirm it with his own eyes. But he didn't move. He just looked up at me, and there was no anger, no shock in his eyes. Only coldness. Cold, stubborn denial. "I'm not watching it," he said quietly but firmly. "What? Why?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, this is proof. It explains everything." "I'm not watching it," he repeated, his voice harder now. "I won't watch something that shows my son, the man I thought of as a son, doing something like that. I don't want to see it." "But it's the truth." I almost shouted. "You can't hide from the truth." "It's your truth, Brooke," he snapped. "The truth of a bitter woman whose husband left her. Chuck, my son, yes, he's weak. Foolish. Maybe he's in some trouble. But he's not a monster. He'd never do something like that. Betray his own mother? No. I won't believe that." I stared at him, stunned. He didn't want the truth. He chose the lie, because the truth was too unbearable. His love for his son, his blind faith that his boy, flawed as he was, couldn't possibly be cruel, all of that outweighed any evidence. "And Todd?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "You believe him? The man who abandoned his wife when things got hard?" He stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "I don't know what happened between you and Todd. That's your business. But I do know he's always been a good husband, caring, respectful. Maybe you pushed him away with your obsession." He picked up the memory card from the table and handed it back to me. "Put this away. And don't ever show it to me again. There must be another explanation. A mistake. A misunderstanding. Anything but this. I won't let my family fall apart over your fantasies." He left the kitchen, leaving me sitting there alone. I sat at the table, feeling like I was sinking. My last hope, my anchor, my rational, pragmatic father, had just shut the door in my face. He would rather bury his head in the sand than face the monstrous truth about his son. I drove away from my parents' house in a daze. I had lost. Completely. I was utterly, devastatingly alone. That evening, my father called me himself. I answered, hoping he'd come to his senses, that he'd thought it over and was ready to listen. But his voice was cold, almost hostile. "I want you to know," he began without preamble, "I just spoke with Chuck. He confessed everything to me." My heart froze. He told me he was in serious trouble. That he'd fallen into huge debt with dangerous people. That Todd tried to help him, gave him money, tried to find a way out. I stayed silent. I knew exactly what version of the story Chuck, coached by Irene, had fed him. "So," my father continued, his tone hardening, "I solved his problem. His real problem. I gave him the money to pay off his debts. It's over. He has no more reason to lie or make excuses." He paused, and then came the words that hit me like a slap. "Now I want you to solve your problem. I forbid you from talking about that ridiculous video again. Enough. I won't let you destroy this family because of your jealousy toward your brother. You've always envied him, I know that. You've always thought we loved him more. Stop settling scores under the pretense of caring for your mother. Chuck's problem is solved. That's the end of it." And he hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing. The world around me just disappeared. He hadn't only refused to believe me, he'd accused me. Of jealousy. Of trying to destroy the family. He'd painted me as the villain, the schemer taking revenge on poor, misunderstood Chuck. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that, in trying to help, he'd done the most catastrophic thing imaginable. He gave Chuck money. He rewarded him for betrayal. He showed him that lies work, that you can rob your parents, betray your family, and still walk away forgiven, richer than before. He hadn't solved the problem, he'd poured gasoline on it. He'd strengthened Chuck's alliance with Todd and Irene. He'd sent them a clear message: you're untouchable. I'll always be on your side. He'd turned me, his daughter, into enemy number one. And he'd burned every bridge behind me. The phone was silent, but my father's words still rang in my ears. He hadn't just turned away from me, he'd joined them. Mom was broken. Chuck was bought. Todd and Irene had won. I sat alone in my silent apartment, feeling despair slowly harden into something sharper, a cold, focused emptiness. Appealing to conscience, to family ties, that was over. Emotions were useless now. My father, the man of facts, had refused to look at the most important fact of all, the recording. So I needed other facts. Ones he couldn't ignore. Ones that didn't involve his precious son. I needed proof of Todd's guilt. Solid, undeniable, physical proof. And I knew exactly where to look, in this apartment, in the remnants of the life we'd shared. I got up and began searching. Methodically, without panic. I started going through everything that belonged to Todd, his clothes, his documents, his drawers. I didn't even know what I was looking for, just something. Some loose thread he hadn't noticed in his perfect little web. I went through his work contracts, bank statements, old letters. Nothing. Everything was neat, organized, spotless. He was a master of appearances. But I didn't give up. There had to be one mistake. One tiny oversight. I reached his desk. He'd always been proud of how tidy his files were, labeled folders, everything in its place. I opened drawer after drawer, bills, warranty cards, appliance manuals. And then, in the very bottom drawer, beneath a pile of useless old papers, I found something. A small notebook where he scribbled random notes. Inside, folded between the pages, was a piece of paper, a crumpled receipt, folded 4 times. I unfolded it. Golden Calf. The name hit me instantly. A pawn shop, one of the most infamous in the city. A place known for taking anything, no questions asked. My heart started pounding. I looked at the date stamped on the receipt, Monday. The day after the robbery. There was a list written in sloppy handwriting, the appraiser's notes. Silver locket, 1 piece. Souvenir dagger, 2 pieces. Metal glass holder, 4 pieces. My breath caught. These were our things. Grandma's locket. Dad's daggers. I stared at the paper, trembling. This was it. Real proof. Tangible. He hadn't just stolen them, he'd taken them straight to the pawn shop, eager to get rid of the evidence and make a little cash. Probably the same money he later used to help Chuck, pulling him deeper into his web. At the bottom of the receipt was the amount, small, laughably small for things that had meant the world to our family. And then a signature, a messy scrawl. But the client's name was typed. Sykes. I grabbed the receipt, shoved it into my pocket, threw on a jacket, and ran out of the apartment. I had to go there. To that pawn shop. Now. The Golden Calf was in a basement-level shop in an old, crumbling building downtown. Bars on the windows, a weak yellow bulb flickering above the door. I went down the steep steps and pushed open the heavy door. Inside it was cramped, dusty, filled with the smell of old metal and decay. Behind a thick, cloudy glass counter sat a bald man with a gold tooth and a bored, heavy gaze. He looked up from his crossword puzzle and grunted, "What do you want?" I walked up to the counter and laid the receipt in front of him. "I'm here about this. These items, my husband brought them in. I'd like to buy them back." He took the receipt and glanced at it lazily. "Sykes, huh? Yeah, I remember him. Came in Monday. Do you still have the items? Can I get them back?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. He snorted, flashing a gold tooth. "Too late, sweetheart. Your stuff's been sold. What? Sold? When? I gripped the edge of the counter. This morning. Someone came, paid cash, and took them. All by the book, redemption period's over, the goods went up for sale. It felt like the floor fell out from under me. The tiny spark of hope I'd been clinging to flickered out. I was too late. Just a few hours too late. Todd had planned it perfectly. He knew the pawn shop's redemption window was short. He'd picked the kind of place where things didn't sit around long. Do you at least remember who bought them? I asked, already bracing for disappointment. Anything at all? He shrugged. What's it to you? I felt crushed. That was it. My last thread snapped. I turned to leave. Hey, wait up, he called after me. I stopped. He was looking at me differently now, his eyes sharper, curious. That husband of yours, Sykes, I didn't like him, he said, pushing his crossword aside. Something off about that guy. Shifty. Wouldn't look me in the eye. That's the kind that usually brings in stolen stuff. I don't like dealing with people like that. He paused, as if deciding whether to keep talking, and the buyer, she was strange too. Or rather, the buyer was a woman. Older lady. Came in first thing this morning, right when I opened. Paid cash, didn't haggle. Like she knew exactly what she wanted. In a hurry, too. Something inside me clenched. A woman? Older? Do you remember her name? Maybe she left any info? He smirked. Normally, that's confidential. But since your hubby rubbed me the wrong way, let's just say I don't like being dragged into dirty business. He bent down behind the counter, rummaged through a drawer, and pulled out a thick ledger. After flipping through a few pages, he found what he needed. By law, we have to log buyer details when the amount's big enough. ID info, all that. He grabbed a pen, scribbled something on a scrap of paper, and slid it toward me through the glass slot. Here. Take a look. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. I read the words. Just a name. Irene Sykes. The world went silent. I could hear only the rush of blood in my ears. Irene. It was her. She hadn't just been orchestrating things over the phone, spinning lies and rumors. She'd personally come here, into this filthy pawn shop, to clean up the evidence herself. To erase every trace. She wasn't just a mastermind. She was a direct participant. And she'd made a fatal mistake. She'd left a trail, a paper trail, official and undeniable, leading straight to her. I stared at her name on the slip of paper, and a cold rush of triumph surged through me. Irene Sykes. This was it. The irrefutable proof I'd been searching for. Not words. Not a video my father refused to watch. But a document, a fact, backed by a legal record and an ID. She'd trapped herself. In her arrogance, and her need to control everything, she'd finally slipped. I clenched the paper in my fist. Now I had a weapon. And I knew exactly where to strike. I didn't go to her house. I'd made that mistake once before. Meeting her alone would be pointless. She'd just play the same game again, twist the story, make me look insane, then call Todd and invent something new. No. This confrontation had to be public. I needed witnesses. I called her. My voice was calm, almost pleasant. Irene, hello. It's Brooke. We need to meet. Urgently. There was a short pause on the line. I could practically feel her calculating. Brooke, dear, I'm not sure that's a good idea, she began in her usual syrupy tone. After your last visit, I wasn't feeling well. This isn't a request, I cut her off. I have something you'll want to see. It's about the pawn shop, Golden Calf. I heard her inhale sharply. Got her. Let's meet in an hour at Cafe Daisy. You still like that place, don't you? Cafe Daisy was popular in our neighborhood. Always crowded during the day, moms with strollers, retirees, office workers from nearby buildings. Perfect. All right, she said after a pause. Her voice had lost its sugary edge. 1 hour. Before leaving, I made another call to my father. Dad, I said quickly, not letting him interrupt. I know you don't want to hear me out, but please, just this once. Come to Cafe Daisy by the park in an hour. Irene will be there. Just come and listen. That's all I'm asking. I hung up before he could answer. I didn't know if he'd come, but I had to try. I arrived a few minutes early. Sat at a table by the window, where I could see the whole cafe. Just as I'd hoped, it was busy. I recognized a few faces, my parents' neighbor, one of Mom's former colleagues. Even better. Irene walked in right on time. She was dressed impeccably, in a gray coat, her face set in that perfect mask of dignified sorrow. She scanned the room, spotted me, and walked straight to my table. She sat down across from me, placing her perfectly manicured hands, still in gloves, on the table. I'm listening, Brooke, she said softly, but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. I just hope you're not planning another scene like last time. This time I didn't bother with small talk. I pulled the slip of paper from my pocket, the one from the pawn shop, and placed it right in front of her. What's this? She asked, without even glancing at it. It's your name, Irene. The name of the person who bought my family's stolen things, the ones your son pawned the day after the burglary. I expected anything, panic, anger, maybe an attempt to snatch the paper from me. But she smiled. A soft, sorrowful smile full of saintly forgiveness. She looked at me, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. My poor girl, she whispered. Look what this has done to you. You can only see the bad in everything now. She picked up the paper and steadied it. Yes, she said calmly. Yes, that's my name. Yes, I went to that pawn shop. Yes, I bought those things. Her admission was so casual, so calm, that for a second I froze. People at nearby tables, having caught words like pawn shop and stolen things, started listening in. You admit it? I asked. There's nothing to admit, Brooke, she said, shaking her head. A single tear rolled down her cheek. What I did was an act of love. A desperate act of love for your family. I just stared at her, completely thrown off. I found out what Todd had done, she continued, her voice trembling as if she were fighting back sobs. My poor, foolish boy. He saw that Chuck was in trouble, being threatened, and he tried to help him. Without telling anyone. He took your things to get money quickly, to save your brother. It was stupid, yes, and wrong, but he meant well. Her voice grew louder with every word. Now the entire cafe was listening, holding their breath. She was performing. When I found out, I was horrified, she went on, pressing a hand to her heart. Just imagine the shame that could have fallen on your family. Poor Marley, who's already so unwell. I didn't sleep all night. And in the morning, I took all my savings, everything I'd been putting aside for years, and went to that awful pawn shop. I bought everything back, every single thing, to save your family's reputation. To protect Marley from a public scandal. She pulled a handkerchief from her purse and dabbed her eyes. I was planning to return everything quietly, once things settled down. Once your mother got the help she needed. I didn't want anyone to know about my son's mistake. I just wanted to be your family's secret guardian angel. She looked at me with infinite maternal sorrow. And you turned my act of sacrifice into an accusation. You followed me, dragged me here, humiliated me in front of everyone. For what? For trying to protect your mother's honor? Then she broke into sobs, loud, raw, pitiful, the kind of crying only an older woman wronged in her goodness could manage. The entire cafe was staring at me now. I could see it in their faces, judgment, pity, disgust. I was the monster, tormenting this poor, heartbroken saint who'd only tried to save our family. And just then, I saw my father walk into the cafe. He stopped in the doorway, scanning the scene. He saw me sitting stiffly at the table, saw Irene crying her heart out, saw the crowd watching us. He hadn't heard the beginning. He saw only the ending, the one Irene had so carefully staged for him. He strode over to us. "Irene, what's going on here?" he demanded. Irene looked up at him with tearful eyes. "Russell, I don't know," she said, voice trembling. "It's Brooke. She's accusing me of terrible things. She says I'm a thief. And all I ever wanted was to help." She started crying even harder. My father turned to me. His look was worse than a shout. It was pure contempt. "Brooke, what's wrong with you?" he growled. "Have you lost your mind? Attacking an older woman in public like this?" "Dad, you don't understand, she's lying," I tried to say. "Enough." He slammed his palm on the table. The plates rattled. "I understand plenty. I understand that you've made me ashamed to call you my daughter." He turned to Irene, helping her stand. He handled her as if she were made of glass. "Let's get you out of here. I'll take you home." He led her toward the door, holding her by the arm. At the threshold, he turned back, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You sit here and think about what you've done. I'm ashamed that you're my daughter." They left. I stayed sitting there, alone, in the middle of the cafe, under the heavy silence and the stares of dozens of people, judgmental, pitying, curious. My proof, my weapon, had just turned against me. Irene hadn't just deflected my attack, she'd used it to make my father her most loyal ally. She'd made him publicly renounce me. And now I wasn't just alone, I was an outcast. I don't remember how I left the cafe, how I reached the car, how I drove home. I moved like a ghost, through fog, hearing nothing, feeling nothing. My father's words, "I'm ashamed that you're my daughter," burned into my mind like a brand. Public humiliation. Public rejection. Irene had won. Completely. She hadn't just defeated me, she'd crushed me, using the hands of the person I loved most. I locked myself in my apartment. I didn't answer the phone. I knew it was Tessa calling. Maybe even Mom, if my father had already told her his version of what had happened. I couldn't talk to anyone. What could I even say? Anything that came out of my mouth now would sound like the ramblings of a madwoman. For 2 days, I was like a ghost. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, replaying everything that had happened over the past few weeks, searching for my mistake. Where had I gone wrong? The answer was simple: I had underestimated them. I thought I was fighting greed and stupidity. But my real enemy was something far worse: cold, calculated evil combined with total lack of conscience. They were willing to do anything. And I wasn't. I'd still been trying to play fair, still trying to protect the family from breaking apart, while they struck mercilessly, without hesitation or pity. On the 3rd day, I forced myself to get up. Enough. If I gave up now, they'd win completely. Mom would be destroyed, and I'd go down in family history as the crazy daughter who ruined everything. I had to go back to work. At least to make it look like I was functioning, to stop them from using my instability as more ammunition. It was hard. My colleagues clearly already knew about the rumors. Some looked at me with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with quiet avoidance. I felt like I was under a microscope. Every word, every movement was being analyzed. I tried to keep it together. Smiled when I needed to, talked about school matters, pretended everything was fine. It was unbearable. During lunch break, while I was sorting papers at my desk, the secretary popped her head in. "Brooke, a courier just dropped this off for you." She placed a large, thick white envelope on my desk. My name and work address were printed neatly on the front, no return address. "Thanks, Maisie," I said, taking it. It was heavy. Inside, I could feel the edges of a thick stack of papers. I grabbed a letter opener and sliced it open. Inside was a pile of documents, at least 20 pages. On top was a cover letter from a law firm. I scanned the first few lines. "We hereby notify you that your husband, Todd Sykes, has filed a petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce. I'd expected that. After everything that had happened, it was the logical next step. I gave a bitter smile. He didn't even have the decency to tell me in person, just sent the papers to my workplace, by courier, to humiliate me even more. I started reading the petition itself. And with every line, the cold inside me deepened. This wasn't just a divorce filing, it was a prosecution. Each dry, lawyerly phrase painted a vivid picture, the version of reality Todd and his attorney had crafted, a slow, tragic unraveling of our marriage. The cause? Me. In recent months, my mental and emotional condition had become a serious concern. Increasing episodes of unreasonable jealousy and suspicion. Signs of paranoid disorder, expressed through accusations of non-existent conspiracies against him and his family. The next pages twisted everything that had happened beyond recognition. My visit to Irene was described as an unprovoked act of aggression toward an elderly woman. My words at the country house were public hysterics. The cafe scene, a deliberate provocation and defamation. It was all there. Every desperate act, every attempt to uncover the truth, turned inside out and presented as evidence of my mental instability. He wasn't just divorcing me. He was building an official, legal document that would brand me as insane, permanently. He was doing it so that in any future legal proceedings, whether about Mom's guardianship or property, I'd already be discredited. No court, no authority would take the word of a woman whose husband had fled from her emotional instability and false accusations. I read to the end. My hands had gone numb. The blow was so heavy I could barely breathe. They'd moved to a new level. From family manipulation and gossip to legal warfare. Cold, ruthless, calculated. I set the pages aside and saw another document beneath them. This one had a different title, Motion for Emergency Protective Measures. I started reading, and my vision went dark. Todd was asking the court for an emergency restraining order. He wanted to forbid me, temporarily, from approaching him or his mother. And to temporarily ban me from living in our shared apartment. I read through the legal jargon, and the meaning was crystal clear and horrifying. He claimed my behavior had become unpredictable and potentially dangerous. That after the cafe incident, he feared for his personal safety and property. That my unstable mental state made cohabitation impossible, and that he was concerned I might harm him or myself in a paranoid outburst. He wasn't just divorcing me. He wasn't just declaring me insane. He was trying to throw me out. To make me homeless. He wanted to strip away the last thing I had left, a roof over my head. To leave me completely alone, no home, no family, branded a dangerous lunatic. This was total destruction. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to erase me. To take everything, my family, my reputation, my home, my sanity. And staring at those papers, I realized they were getting close. I sat there in my office, clutching the documents. The walls felt like they were closing in. My entire world had shrunk to those few sheets of paper, filled with sterile, deadly phrases. Paranoid disorder. Potentially dangerous. Prohibit residence. Each word was a nail hammered into my coffin. That was the first moment I truly broke. Not in rage, but in silence. A heavy, suffocating despair filled me completely. They had won. I had lost on every front. My father had turned his back on me. Public opinion was against me. And now even the law, the thing that was supposed to protect me, had become their weapon. I had nothing left. Not a single ally. Not one solid ground to stand on. I gathered the papers, stuffed them into my bag, told the secretary I wasn't feeling well, and left work. Where was I supposed to go? To an empty apartment I'd soon be kicked out of by court order? To my father, who thought I was a crazy schemer? There was only one place left. One person. My mother. She was weak, broken, humiliated, but she was still my mother. I knew I couldn't tell her everything. The truth about Chuck's betrayal would crush her completely. But I couldn't carry this weight alone anymore. I needed someone, anyone, to believe me. When I got to my parents' house, Dad wasn't there, probably fixing something at the country house, trying to repair what his son and son-in-law had destroyed. Mom was home alone. She sat in her favorite chair, wrapped in a blanket, looking even more frail than before. When she saw me, her face filled with worry. "Brooke, what happened? You look terrible." I couldn't hold it in anymore. I sank to the carpet by her feet, laid my head on her knees, and started to cry. For the first time in all this time. I cried from exhaustion, from loneliness, from the sheer injustice of it all. I cried the way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Mom stroked my hair without saying a word. She was just there, and in that simple touch, there was more comfort than in any words. When I finally calmed down, I lifted my head and looked at her. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. They're going to destroy me." Then I told her. Not everything, but most of it. I told her that Todd had left me. That he and his mother were spreading vile rumors around town. That the burglary at the country house had been his doing, part of some plan I didn't fully understand. I showed her the court papers, told her he was trying to declare me insane and throw me out of the apartment. "I don't even know why he's doing this," I said, my voice breaking. "Maybe he's in debt. Maybe he wants to take our apartment or the country house. I don't understand, Mom. I just know he won't stop. And I'm alone. Completely alone. Dad doesn't believe me. He thinks I made it all up." I expected her to panic, to cry, to start worrying. But she didn't. The softness in her eyes disappeared. Beneath the exhaustion and sadness, something else started to shine, a cold, steady fire. I'd never seen that look in her eyes before. It was the look of someone who had just connected all the pieces. She was silent for a long moment, staring past me into nothing. Then she said quietly, "So she finally did it. After all these years." "Who, Mom? What are you talking about?" "Irene," she said the name like she was spitting out poison. "This isn't about money, Brooke. Or the house. Money is just a cover. It's about your father. And me." She stood up, walked to the old dresser, and pulled out a photo album. Sitting down beside me, she opened it. "You don't really know much about Todd's family," she began, her voice calm, almost detached. "You only know what they told you. That his father, Donald, was a decent engineer who went bankrupt in the 90s and drank himself to death, right?" I nodded. "That's not the whole story. Donald Sykes and your father weren't just colleagues. They were best friends and business partners. In the early 90s, they started a small construction company together. Your father was the brains, brilliant, methodical. Donald was the charm, good with people, great at finding clients. Business was booming." She turned the page. There they were, in a faded old photograph, two young men smiling with their arms around each other. One was my father. The other, unmistakably, was Donald Sykes. But then Donald got involved with the wrong people. Started taking shady contracts. Borrowed money from some dangerous types. He tried to hide it from your father, but Russell found out. He gave Donald an ultimatum: either they ran the business clean or they split. He even offered to sell off part of their assets to pay the debts. But Donald was too proud. Or too scared. He refused. What happened then? I whispered. Your father walked away. Took his share, exactly half, as they'd agreed, and left. He couldn't risk our family over Donald's recklessness. Without Russell's guidance, Donald's company collapsed within 6 months. The criminals took everything: his house, his car, the business. He was left with nothing. And he started drinking. Badly. A few years later, he died of liver failure. Mom closed the album. Irene always blamed your father for that. She was convinced Russell had abandoned her husband in his darkest hour. She refused to see that Donald had destroyed himself. It was easier to find someone else to hate. And she found her scapegoat. She's hated your father ever since, quietly, bitterly, obsessively. A chill ran down my spine. This feud had been going on for decades, and I'd had no idea. I thought our families were just old acquaintances. But why? I asked. Why did she let Todd marry me, then? That was her plan, Mom said with a bitter laugh. The perfect revenge. To plant her son inside our family. To wait. To bide her time until the perfect moment to strike from within. And she did. Mom got up and went to the window. There's something I've never told anyone, not even your father, she said, looking out at the street. I went to Donald's funeral. Russell was away on a long business trip, and I went alone, out of respect for the past. There weren't many people there. And just as I was about to leave, Irene came up to me. Dressed all in black. Her eyes were dry, burning with rage. She grabbed my hand and hissed right into my face. Mom fell silent, reliving it. She said, "Your husband put him in the grave. But don't worry. I'll live long enough to see your family turn to dust. I swear to God, I'll watch your Russell crawl on his knees, and you, his precious wife, begging in the streets." Mom turned back to me. Her eyes no longer looked weak or scared. They were like steel. "I thought she was just grieving," she said quietly. "I didn't take it seriously. I should have. That wasn't grief. It was a curse. And she's been living all these years to make it come true. What they're doing now, Brooke, it's not about money. It's revenge. And her target isn't you or the house. Her target is me. Destroying me means destroying your father. This is her final, and most devastating, strike." My mother's words about Irene's old curse hit the quiet room like a thunderclap. Everything snapped into place. This wasn't just a money scheme. It was a vendetta, aged like bitter wine, served ice cold. And my mother was the main course. Suddenly the despair and numbness that had paralyzed me for days evaporated, replaced by a hard, crystal clarity. I understood my enemy. I understood the motive. I wasn't fighting ghosts, or greed, or madness. I was fighting pure, undiluted hate. And you don't beg mercy from an enemy like that. You destroy them. I looked at Mom. The fear was gone from her face. In its place was a calm, iron resolve. She passed that resolve to me. Now there were two of us. "Thank you, Mom," I said. That was enough. We didn't need more words. I couldn't play defense anymore. No more reacting, no more excuses, no more trying to prove anything. It was time to attack, and to hit the weakest point. The place where their confidence was strongest, my father's blind love for his son. A plan formed in my head at once, bold, risky, but the only one that could work. "Mom, I have to go. I need to do something. Please just trust me," I said. She nodded. "Go. Do what you have to." First, I stopped by a phone shop and bought the cheapest burner, an old button phone, and a new SIM card. A number that couldn't be traced back to me. My tool. In the car, I slid in the SIM and texted Chuck one sentence: "I know Dad gave you the money. Meet me in an hour at the old park by the river. If you don't, everyone will see the video. And Dad will learn what his money really paid for." I had no doubt he'd come. Fear is his favorite motivator. Then I drove to the country house. I knew Dad would be there. He always went out when he needed to think. His car was already at the gate. He was in the garden, cutting dead branches off the apple trees. When he saw me, he frowned. "I told you," he started. "Dad, be quiet and listen," I cut in. My tone stopped him cold. "In half an hour, Chuck will get here. He thinks he's meeting me here. He thinks I stole his phone. Any minute now, Todd is going to call that phone. They'll go over their plan. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to be here. Hide inside by the window and just listen. With your own ears." He stared at me, stubbornness wrestling with curiosity. He wanted to throw me out, but something in my voice and my certainty made him hesitate. "What kind of stunt is this now?" he grumbled. But I could see he was intrigued. "It's not a stunt. It's the finale. Either you hear the truth now, or you never will. And then don't say I didn't give you a chance." I didn't wait for his answer. I turned and slipped to the old shed at the far end of the yard. From there I could see the lawn, but no one could see me. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if it didn't work? What if Todd didn't call? What if Chuck suspected something? Then the gate creaked. Chuck arrived, alone. He looked around nervously, searching for me. "Brooke? Where are you?" he whispered. I stayed silent. He walked deeper into the yard and stopped in the middle of the lawn. He pulled out his phone to call me, and right then it rang on its own. I watched him glance at the screen and answer in a rush. "Yeah, Todd, hey." I held my breath. A shadow moved in the house window. Dad was there. He was listening. Chuck spoke softly, but in the quiet autumn garden, every word carried. "Yeah, I'm here." "No, she's not here yet." "What?" "No, I don't think she suspects anything. She's sure I'm scared out of my mind." A nervous laugh. "Yeah, Dad gave me the money. Just like we planned. The old man bought the debt story. Yes, the whole amount. I'm telling you, he's on my side. He'd sooner believe Brooke teamed up with aliens than that his precious son could do something like this." He paced the lawn. I could see his profile, see him nodding as he listened to the voice on the other end. "What do we do with her now? Maybe that's enough? We got what we wanted. Maybe just leave her alone?" A pause. He listened. His face stretched, stiffened. "Yeah, I get it. We can't stop. Not until my mother is legally declared incompetent. Otherwise, this could fall apart." "Yes, I remember the doctor. You set it up? When do we take her?" A chill ran over my skin. A doctor. So they'd already lined one up. "No, Dad won't suspect a thing. He's completely on our side now. He'll take her to the doctor himself if we set it up right. We'll say it's just a checkup, routine stuff. He'll do anything not to believe what Brooke told him." Another silence. "Yeah, got it. Keep her in the dark. Let her think I'm still scared of her. Safer that way. Okay, Todd, I'll wait for her. I'll call you right after we talk. Bye." He hung up and stood there a minute, staring at his phone. And at that moment the front door flew open. Dad stood on the porch. I had never seen him like that. His face wasn't white or red, it was the color of ash, as if all the blood had drained out in an instant. He didn't shout. He didn't move. He just stood there, looking at his son. Chuck turned at the sound of the door and froze. The phone slipped from his hand and thudded into the grass. He stared at Dad, and a primal, animal terror spread across his face like I'd never seen before. He understood. He understood it had been a trap, and he understood who had sprung it. They stood facing each other for maybe 10 seconds. The silence was worse than any scream. Then Dad took one step forward. And another. He moved toward his son like in a dream. In his dead, empty eyes was something that froze my blood. His denial. His blind love. The wall he'd built around himself. All of it had collapsed in a single moment. And beneath the rubble he saw the truth, naked, ugly, unbearable. Dad walked across the grass toward Chuck, and with every step the silence grew heavier. He didn't say a word. He just walked, staring at his son with that terrible, lifeless gaze. Chuck backed up once. Twice. Then his legs buckled and he crashed to his knees. Dad, it's not what you think, I can explain," he babbled, choking on panic. Dad stopped one step away. He slowly raised his hand. I froze, thinking he was going to hit him. He didn't. He placed his heavy, work-roughened palm on his son's shoulder and squeezed. Squeezed until Chuck yelped in pain. "Get up," Dad said. His voice was low, hoarse, unrecognizable. The voice of a stranger. Sobbing, Chuck staggered to his feet. "We're going home," Dad said, not letting go of his shoulder. And he marched him to the car like a prisoner. I stepped out of my hiding place just as they were getting into the car. Dad looked over his shoulder at me. There was no apology in his eyes, no gratitude, only a bottomless, scorched pain. He gave me a silent nod, as if ordering me to follow. The drive back to the city felt endless. I trailed behind his car, trembling the whole way. I'd set the trap. I'd won. The truth was finally out. But there was no satisfaction, only the feeling that I'd just witnessed a catastrophe unfold. I had destroyed my father's world. And I had no idea what would come next. Mom was waiting when we arrived. She must have understood everything the moment she saw Dad's face as he led a shaking, tear-streaked Chuck into the apartment. She didn't ask a single question. She just sat down on the couch, her expression turning to one of icy calm. She was bracing herself for the worst. Dad pushed Chuck into a chair across from her, almost threw him into it. "Talk," he said in that same quiet, terrifying voice. And Chuck talked. Or rather, he broke down completely. He sobbed, stammered, choking on his words, spilling every bit of filth he'd been carrying inside him. It was total, unconditional surrender. He confessed everything. The debts, far larger than what he'd admitted to Dad. The threats from collectors. How Todd had shown up like some kind of savior and offered him a way out. He said it was just a game, Chuck cried, smearing tears and snot across his face. He said we'd just make it look like Mom was having problems, so you, Dad, would sign the country house over to us, to protect it from being taken for my debts. He swore it would all be fake. Dad didn't move. He stood by the bookshelf, arms crossed, completely still, like a statue carved from stone. He said Brooke was going to divorce him anyway, Chuck went on, turning to me with pleading eyes, as if I could somehow save him. He said she'd turn you against me, Dad, and I'd be left with nothing. This way, at least, I'd have something. He made me believe it was the only way to save myself, the only way to have a future. He told it all, the burglary, the earring, the fake investigator. With every word, I saw the last flicker of hope die in my father's eyes. He was listening to a detailed account of betrayal, his son's betrayal, and it was killing him right in front of us. "And the money?" Mom suddenly asked. Her voice was calm and cold as ice. "The money your father gave you. Did you give it to Todd?" Chuck flinched and lowered his head. "Yes," he whispered. "He said that's how it had to be. That he'd handle my creditors himself. He said it was all part of the plan." Dad's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He hadn't just paid off his son's debts, he'd financed the operation to destroy his own wife. "And Irene?" Dad asked, the first thing he'd said this whole time. Chuck shrank like he'd been struck. She was in charge of everything," he stammered. "She called every day, told us what to do, what to say. She came up with the rumors. She's the one who made Todd file for divorce and accused Brooke of being insane. She said we had to move fast and hit hard before anyone caught on. She said it was her revenge for Donald." Dad's face twisted with pain. He understood. And for a moment, it felt like that was the breaking point, like nothing could possibly get worse. But we were wrong. "What else?" Mom asked. Her voice was sharp, steely. "Tell us everything." Chuck lifted his terrified eyes to her. "Mom, I'm sorry." "Talk," she said. It's not over," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The plan, it's already in its final stage. The rumors, my divorce, it had all been the setup. The real blow was still to come." We froze. "They didn't just want to get you declared incompetent through the guardianship board, that takes too long, too risky. They had another plan. A faster one." He paused, gathering what little courage he had left. Irene found a doctor. In a private clinic. Todd paid him a lot of money. A lot. The doctor already prepared a fake medical file, in your name, Mom. Mom gripped the armrests of the couch. The file has everything, a made-up medical history for the past 6 months. Fake appointments with a neurologist. Complaints about memory lapses, aggression. Fabricated lab results. And the diagnosis, his voice cracked. Diagnosis, early-stage dementia with psychotic episodes. My blood ran cold. This was beyond evil, beyond anything I could have imagined. They weren't just spreading rumors. They were fabricating evidence. That file, Chuck continued, staring at the floor, it's ready. It's sitting at the clinic. And next week, Todd and I were supposed to convince Dad that you were getting worse, that you needed an urgent consultation with a specialist. We'd bring you there, and that doctor, using the fake file and one short appointment, would issue an official report. A report that could go straight to court. And with that report, the court would declare you legally incompetent in one session. That was their plan. Silence fell over the room. We looked at each other, and I saw in my parents' eyes the same horror I felt. The scheme wasn't just cruel, it was perfectly calculated. Almost finished. We had been standing on the edge of a cliff, completely unaware. They were one step away from legally erasing my mother, turning her into a powerless, voiceless person under their control. The realization of how close they'd come hit like a shockwave. Another week, maybe 2, and it would have been over. Dad was the first to move. All the rage, the pain, the disbelief on his face drained away, replaced by a cold, steady expression, the look of an engineer faced with a complex but solvable problem. He turned to Chuck. The clinic. The address. The doctor's name, he said curtly, like giving an order on a factory floor. Chuck flinched and, stammering, gave him the address of the private medical center and the doctor's name. Dad silently pulled out his phone and began typing something. Then he looked at me, and for the first time in all this time, I saw something new in his eyes. Not anger. Not contempt. Guilt. Deep, unbearable guilt. I'm sorry, daughter, he said quietly. I'm sorry I was blind. I didn't answer. I just nodded. Apologies didn't matter now. What mattered was what we were going to do next. So what now? Dad asked, looking at both of us. Go to the police? Show them the recording? File a report against that doctor? I gave a bitter laugh. And what good would that do? Hardy's handling our case, Todd's old friend. He'll bury it before it ever sees daylight. And the recording? It'll only prove Chuck's guilt, and you, Dad, wouldn't survive that. Besides, it won't clear Mom's name. It would just turn our family tragedy into a public circus. People would gossip that the neighbor's son is a thief and their daughter threw her own brother in jail. Irene and Todd would walk away clean, dump all the blame on Chuck, and Mom would still look like a poor old woman who lost her mind and caused all this. She's right, Mom said firmly. She rose from the couch, her posture straight, her old dignity returning. A private victory means nothing. They tried to destroy me publicly, and my vindication has to be just as public. People need to hear the truth. They need to see who they really are. We fell silent, thinking over her words. She was absolutely right. Getting them punished legally was one thing, but clearing our names, wiping off the filth they'd thrown at us, that could only happen one way, by making them expose themselves in front of everyone they'd deceived. And then it hit me. Mom's birthday, I said. It's the day after tomorrow. My parents exchanged glances. Mom was turning 63. We'd planned a small celebration, just close friends, neighbors, relatives. About 30 people. The very same people Irene had spent weeks poisoning against us. The invitations had been sent a month ago. This is our chance, I said, feeling a spark of adrenaline come alive inside me again. This is our stage. We'll give them a show they'll never forget. The plan formed almost instantly. We sat in the kitchen late into the night, going over every detail, every move. Chuck sat with us, quiet, obedient, desperate to atone in any way he could. He was our secret weapon. Our Trojan horse. The next day, I started. I picked up my phone and called Todd. It took several deep breaths before I could steady my voice. I had to play the role of my life, the broken, guilt-ridden, repentant wife. He didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said finally, his tone cold. "Todd, it's me. Brooke." I made sure my voice trembled as if I'd been crying. "What do you want?" There was barely hidden disgust in his voice. "Todd, I want to apologize," I said between sobs. "For everything. For the scene at the cafe, for the things I said about you and your mother. I wasn't myself. I see that now. Everything that happened with Mom, it just broke me. I wasn't thinking straight." He didn't reply. But I knew he was listening and believing every word. It fit perfectly into the story he'd built for himself. "Dad talked to me yesterday," I went on, sniffling. "He explained everything. About Chuck, the debts, how you and Irene tried to help us. God, I was such a fool. Such a blind, ungrateful fool." "Calm down, Brooke," he said. There was a note of satisfaction in his voice, the sound of victory. He thought I was crawling back. "I can't calm down." I cried. "I ruined everything. Our marriage, our family, all of it. Todd, please, I'm begging you, let me fix this. Please give me a chance." "What do you want?" he asked, his tone softening. "Tomorrow's Mom's birthday," I said quickly. "We're having people over, family, friends, neighbors. I can't let everyone see that things are falling apart. It'll destroy her. Please, I'm begging you, come with Irene. Just for an hour. Pretend we're okay. Do it for Mom. She deserves to see her family together on her birthday. After that, I'll sign the divorce papers, whatever you want. I won't fight you on anything. Just come. Please." I could hear the smile in his voice. He didn't even need to say it. His plan had worked perfectly. I was crushed, defeated, and begging. "All right, Brooke," he said magnanimously. "We'll think about it. I'll talk to Mom. We'll come. For your mother's sake. Thank you, Todd. Thank you so much. I owe you everything." When I hung up, I felt sick, disgusted with him, with myself. But the bait was taken. They would come. They'd come to bask in their victory, to see me broken and humiliated, to accept sympathy for the poor sick mother-in-law and the crazy wife. Then I made the second call, to Irene. I put on the same performance, the tears, the regret, the desperate pleading. She was colder than Todd, but I could hear the same smug satisfaction in her voice. She agreed to come, saying as she hung up, "I hope you really have learned your lesson, Brooke. Sometimes bitter truth cuts deeper than sweet lies." How ironic. One call remained, the most important one. I dialed Detective Hardy. "Hardy, hello. This is Brooke." "Yes, Brooke. I'm listening." His tone was dry and professional. "Hardy, this isn't about the case. It's personal. Tomorrow is my mother Marley's birthday. We're hosting a small family gathering." "Congratulations," he said flatly. "The thing is, I'd like to give her a very special gift. A gift that might help clear up some of those unfortunate misunderstandings surrounding the break-in at our country house. I think you, as the lead investigator, might find it interesting to see." There was a pause. I could feel him tense up. "What exactly do you mean?" "Come and see," I said. "I'm inviting you as a family friend. After all, you are an old friend of my husband's, right? Todd and his mother will be there too. We'd be delighted to have you join us." I mentioned Todd on purpose, so Hardy would think everything was under control. That his friend Todd knew about it and approved. He'd assume I was planning some public apology, maybe something that would confirm their version of me being unstable. In his eyes, being there would just mean he was witnessing Todd's influence and control over me. "All right, Brooke," he said after a long pause. "I'll try to be there." I hung up. It was done. The trap was set. All the pieces were on the board. Everyone would be in the same place at the same time, the villains, confident in their victory, the victims, ready for one last stand, the deceived audience, represented by our guests, and the man of law, convinced he was on the winning side. Tomorrow at my parents' house, there wouldn't be a birthday. There would be a trial, public, merciless, and final. After I hung up with Hardy, a shiver ran through me. Not of fear, of anticipation. The last piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. The mousetrap was armed, the bait was laid. All that was left was to wait for the mice to show up for the feast. The next day was spent in preparation. Not for a celebration, for war. Mom, having shaken off the apathy of the past weeks, was in command with an iron will. She was a general preparing for her final battle. She chose the tablecloth, arranged the dishes, ordered the food, every ordinary gesture filled with quiet determination. She was preparing the stage for her triumph. Dad was silent and grim. In the morning he left without a word, returning a few hours later with a large cardboard box that he carried into his room and locked the door. I didn't ask what was inside. I knew. Chuck was my shadow. Pale, hollow-eyed, completely obedient. He did everything I said without question. He was broken but useful. Not out of courage, out of fear. He was terrified of Dad, of me, of his own future. And that fear made him dependable. I handled the technical side. I rented a set of powerful but compact speakers. Through friends, I found a decent sound technician, a young guy I paid well to run the music during the party. I explained that there would be 2 sound sources and that at a certain moment, he'd need to switch to the second one. He didn't understand why, but for good money, he didn't ask questions. We set up the visible main speaker by the stereo system, and the second, smaller but stronger one, hidden behind the curtain at the other end of the room. In my hand, I held 2 remotes, one for each. I couldn't afford a single mistake. By 7 in the evening, the guests began to arrive. The house filled with chatter, laughter, clinking glasses. The air was thick with tension. All these people, our neighbors, friends, colleagues, knew about the tragedy in our family. They looked at Mom with pity, at me with cautious curiosity, and at Dad with awkward sympathy. They'd come for a birthday, but it felt more like a wake. And then they arrived. Todd and Irene. They walked in like Roman conquerors, Todd in an expensive suit with flowers for Mom, Irene in a sleek, elegant dress, her face the picture of noble sorrow. Instantly, all eyes were on them. Guests surrounded them, offering condolences. "Todd, how are you holding up?" "Irene, you're so kind to come and support them in such a difficult time." They accepted the sympathy with modest smiles. Todd hugged my father, murmuring that everything would be all right. Irene kissed Mom on the cheek and whispered, "Stay strong, Marley. We're with you." The height of hypocrisy. I watched from the corner of the room. Todd caught my eye and gave me a small, triumphant smirk. I lowered my gaze, keeping up my act to the end. Hardy showed up too, in plain clothes, reserved and official looking. Todd went straight to him, clapped him on the shoulder, introduced him to my father as an old friend who'd been helping the family through this difficult time. Hardy looked confident, self-assured, a man convinced he was among the right people. The evening dragged on painfully. Guests gave toasts, wishing Mom good health. Especially health, the word echoed in every speech. Todd and Irene sat at the head of the table, the guests of honor, nodding solemnly to every word with mournful faces. Finally, the moment came. Dad raised his glass. The room fell silent. "My dear friends," he began, his voice firm as steel. "Thank you for coming to celebrate my wife Marley. She is the heart of this family. And lately, her heart has suffered from lies, from betrayal, from slander. Tonight, we're putting an end to it. And as her birthday gift, I want to give the floor to our daughter, Brooke. She has a story to tell. Every eye turned to me. Todd and Irene exchanged quick glances, a mix of surprise and disdain. They thought my public confession was about to begin. I stood up. The small remote was hidden in my hand. "Good evening," I said, scanning the room of silent faces. "The story I want to tell started a month ago, when my father installed a hidden camera at our country house." I spoke calmly, evenly, without emotion. I told everything: how I'd seen the footage of my husband and my brother, their plan, the planted earring, how Todd had used his investigator friend to steer the case away from the truth. How Irene had methodically called everyone in this room, spreading filthy lies about my mother's illness. How fake medical documents had been prepared. I spoke while looking straight into Todd's and Irene's eyes. Their faces changed, surprise gave way to anger, then to barely concealed panic. The guests listened, holding their breath. Confusion spread across their faces. They didn't know whom to believe. When I finished speaking, the room fell silent, dead silent. And then Irene laughed. Loud, theatrical, cruel laughter. "Oh, my God! What an imagination!" she exclaimed, turning to the guests. "Poor girl. The grief has finally driven her insane. She's made up an entire detective story." Todd jumped to his feet right away, his face full of mock concern. "Someone help her," he cried dramatically. "Can't you see she's not well? She needs a doctor. Brooke, sweetheart, let's go. You need to rest." He took a step toward me, hand outstretched, certain of his victory. In his eyes, I was just a hysterical woman, nothing I said mattered. "You think this is fiction?" I asked, locking eyes with him. "Fine. Then let's listen to the fiction together." I lifted the small remote and pressed the button. Nothing happened. The room stayed completely silent. I pressed it again. Still nothing. No sound, no music. Todd's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. He looked at me with pity, smug, patronizing pity. It was over. My bluff had failed. The guests stared at me, their faces softening with sympathy. Poor thing, they were thinking. Completely gone. But I didn't look away. I smiled back at him. Then I gave the faintest nod to the young man in the waiter's uniform standing on the other side of the room. And the next second, the room exploded with sound. The hidden speaker behind the curtain roared to life at full volume. It wasn't just noise, it was a voice. Harsh, distorted by interference, but unmistakably Todd's. "That's why it'll work. No one will believe she's faking it. They'll say it's memory loss. Senile dementia." A collective gasp swept through the room. Todd and Irene froze, their faces turning ghostly white. The recording continued. "Brooke loves her mom. She'll be the first to raise the alarm. She'll help us set everything up herself." They were the most damning fragments I'd edited together, no video, just sound. Todd's voice, plotting how to frame his mother-in-law. And Chuck's trembling, cowardly voice agreeing with him. When the recording stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. Every pair of eyes in the room turned to Irene and Todd. Then Chuck stood up. Pale as death, shaking all over, he took a step forward. "It's true," he said loudly, his voice breaking with tears and despair. "Every word. It's all true. I was part of it. I betrayed my own mother. Forgive me, if you can." That was the final crack. Irene jumped up so violently her chair clattered to the floor. "Lies. All lies. It's fake. Edited," she screamed. But it was too late. Detective Hardy slowly rose from his seat. His face was as white as chalk. He looked at Todd as if seeing him for the first time. And then Dad delivered the killing blow. "In case anyone still has doubts," he said loudly, "here's one more birthday gift for my wife." He disappeared into the hallway and returned a moment later, rolling in a serving cart covered with a cloth. He stopped in the center of the room and, with one swift motion, pulled it off. Under the chandelier's light gleamed a collection of familiar items: Grandma's silver locket, Dad's ceremonial daggers, antique glass holders. Everything that had been stolen. "These," Dad said, his voice ringing like steel, "I retrieved this morning from Irene's apartment. With her gracious permission, of course." It was over. Completely and utterly. Before everyone they tried to deceive, before the law itself, their lies turned to dust. They stood there in the middle of the room, exposed, humiliated, small. Todd stared at the floor. Irene looked straight at my mother, her eyes burning with pure, helpless hatred. No one said a word. The guests silently stepped aside as the two of them stumbled toward the exit, walking through a corridor of contemptuous stares. The door slammed shut behind them. For a few seconds, the silence lingered. Then one guest began to clap. Then another. And then everyone in the room turned toward my mother and applauded. I walked over and stood beside her. She wasn't crying. She stood tall, her head high, accepting their apologies and congratulations. Her honor had been restored. Our family had survived. The war was over. We had won. That's the story, dear friends. A tense, emotional story about betrayal by those closest to you, and about the strength of one woman who dared to go all the way to defend her family's honor. And now, of course, comes the big question, the one I'm sure many of you are asking yourselves right now. Did Brooke do the right thing, staging such a public and almost brutal showdown at her mother's birthday party? Was her revenge justified? Or should she have chosen a different path, a softer one, through the law, even knowing that the law was on her enemy's side? What would you have done in her place? And what do you think of her father? Can his blind love for his son be forgiven, even though it nearly destroyed their family? Does Chuck deserve redemption after everything he's done? Maybe you still have questions about the story, something that felt unfinished or left you wondering. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. Your support means a lot to us. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next stories. They're just as intense and gripping. And of course, tell us what you think in the comments. We read every single one and can't wait to hear your opinions about Brooke's choices and her family's fate. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. We wish you all the very best. At the end of this video, you'll see a window appear in the middle of the screen. Click on it to watch more of our most fascinating stories.